Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. For today's video, I figured we'd take a step back from the Liberals and check out their partners in crime, the NDP. Now, recently they've been doing a little bit more press as since the budget announcement, everybody really wants to know if they are going to support it. Now, the Conservatives, the Bloc, and the Green Party have all come out and said that they are not supporting the budget as soon as they saw it. Yet the NDP are kind of wavering, saying, oh, we need to look through it. We need to see if Trudeau's going to go with our demands. And during a press today with Jugmeat, the CBC actually just went right after him.
We will now go to Marina with CBC. Please go ahead.
Hi there. Will the NDP support the federal budget, yes or no?
We've not made that decision yet, and we've raised a number of concerns. We've said that there's things that we fought for that are in the budget that are good for people, that'll help reduce costs, things like the protection fund for renters, the school food nutrition program, pharmacare, which is going to lower the cost for families. So those are things that are very positive that we fought for that will lower costs. But we raised concerns, and with Benita beside me, one of the concerns we both raised is the fact that the disability benefit is only $200 a month, far too low. So we've got to hear from the Prime Minister and the Liberals on what their response is to our concerns before we make a decision.
As you mentioned, the government has brought in measures that the NDP has asked for, including in this budget, yet you're not committing to vote in favor of it at this point. You keep threatening to pull your support for the government, but then you continue to support it. So at this point, is this an empty threat?
Now, at this point, it's safe to say that he most likely will be agreeing on this whole budget, as that is the deal of the coalition situation. As we take a look here, once this whole agreement happened, it says the deal only requires the NDP to vote in support of the government on confidence votes and budgetary matters such as budget implementation, legislation, and money bills. So right now, Jugmeat is doing this whole song and dance about how they're taking a look at it a little bit harder and that the Conservatives just jumped the gun, but he needs to agree to it regardless.
Well, we said very clearly that unlike the Conservatives who just decided the way they're voting before looking at it, that we would look very clearly at the budget, we would reflect on it with our team, and we've raised some concerns. We've not heard yet a response to our concerns, and so we'll wait to hear that response before we give you a decision. But we're approaching this in a serious manner. We take what we fought for very seriously. These are very important things. Our concerns are also very serious. We want to hear a response before we make our decision.
Now, we'll say it will be interesting to see how long it takes Trudeau to take a look at his demands so that he can make his decision on whether he supports it or not. But as the press conference goes on, the next question is about the carbon tax situation, which Jugmeat should be against because his talking points are always about grocery prices and housing affordability and his people struggling. Yet the carbon tax also plays a role in hurting those people, and this is what he had to say.
Will an NDP government keep the Liberals' carbon price plan to $170 per ton by 2030?
Well, what we said is on the carbon price, our position hasn't changed. We believe there's a
So
price on
will you
pollution that should
will
be
you
there.
keep it then? Will you keep that a carbon price plan to $170 per ton by 2030?
Well, so far what we said is that our position hasn't changed, but we are saying that the Liberals' plan is unfair, and there's elements of that plan that are very unfair. And I've outlined one specific element which I think is glaring in how unfair it is. The Liberals think it's okay to give billions of dollars to oil and gas companies to subsidize them, particularly when they're highly profitable. They're making record profits. Why does that make any sense to continue to give them billions of dollars and then say to working people, we don't have any money for you to support you in trying to put in place a thermal pump or a heat pump in your home? That's unfair. And that type of approach is something that Canadians look at and say, well, that doesn't really feel like we're all fighting this climate crisis together. You're choosing big oil and gas over us. And so what we've said, our plan that we will put forward is one that is fair for working people, takes on the big polluters, and lowers our emissions.
Now, this guy's such a hypocrite. Here he is complaining about the Liberals' carbon tax, yet he's the one who helped keep it in place by not voting for a carbon tax election, which we all know is because he's trying to secure his pension. If he makes it till then, he's sitting pretty. But He constantly talks all the time in the House of Commons about higher grocery prices, higher housing, gas, as people are suffering. Yet the carbon tax is a clear connection to that, but he can't seem to see that. And when he gets pushed back on it again, this is what he says.
That's kind of what the Conservatives are campaigning on is, put the responsibility more on heavy emitters.
Not at all. We're going.
Well, they have campaigned on that in the past, and they want to scrap the carbon price. We've heard Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives say they want to scrap the carbon price plan. We know where the Liberals stand on this, yet there's confusion over where the NDP stands on this. Why can't you give Canadians a clear answer of whether or not you support the carbon price and whether you do support it going to $170 per ton by 2030? This has been in place since 2019. We know the position of the Conservatives. We know the position of the Liberals. Why does there appear to be sudden backpedaling of this?
Well, first of all, I think that we've got to be clear. The Conservatives' plan is no plan. They want to allow for big polluters to pollute as much as they want. They have no such plan to say they want to reduce pollution. They're saying to Canadians, those big polluters that dump toxic waste in rivers, no price on that. Dump as much as you want. The big polluters that pollute our air, that pollute our land, our water, they can do whatever they want. So we should be very clear about what Poilievre is saying. He's saying pollute as much as you want, make as much profit as you want, and damage the environment, damage our planet, damage kids as much as you want. That's the Conservative plan. And people can make a choice if they think that's okay, but that is actually their plan. Pollute as much as you want.
Now he starts going on this rant about the Conservatives wanting to dump sewage everywhere and just pollute. Yet when I tried looking up any information on this, all I could find was Conservatives pledged to stop release of raw sewage into the waterways, and this was back in 2019, which is what the reporter said in regards to Conservative and Liberal plans. And even on their Conservative page, it says Conservatives announce a plan to end the practice of dumping raw sewage into our waters back in 2019. So I don't know if he's talking about something recent and I just can't find it, but that's all I could find in regards to that. But then when he's talking about Conservatives not having a plan, well, if you listen to Harper about a year ago, he said Conservatives shouldn't give up their plan until it's election time.
What I say to Conservative opposition leaders is your job today, broadly speaking, indicate a direction you're going to go, but it's not to talk about how you would run the country. It is to hold the government accountable for how it is running the country and making it where it's mismanagement, incompetence, and corruption. That's the job. And I really worry, and I know the people say develop the plans, develop the proposals, but I worry that that's what the Liberal media here wants Pierre Poilievre to do. Make himself the issue, let them hold him accountable,
for his solution.
while the government, continues on what I think is, for the most part, a pretty poor course, and they're off the hook. The time to tell people about your alternatives in detail is in an election campaign. And look, what's important though is while you're not talking about those details now, you better be developing them in the meantime. And I can tell you from experience, once you get into office, you better have some idea then what you're going to do, because it ain't going to fall into your lap. And look, unfortunately, when Pierre becomes the next prime minister, and I believe that's going to happen, he's going to face. I was very fortunate, I was one of the rare Conservative prime ministers in 100 years who came to office when things were actually pretty good. And I don't think Pierre is going to come in under those kind of circumstances.
Now, I think most of us agree with Harper that even though Pierre's poll numbers are looking great, he would be coming into the government in the state that it's in. And on his other advice, if Pierre wants to keep his poll numbers high like they are, then he needs to come in with a solid plan, because right now all that the Conservatives have is their slogans. And even though the slogans are a bit of a blueprint of what they want to focus on, this is something that they get attacked on all the time, whether it's in the media or by the other party members. And just a few days ago, Vashi was interviewing Melissa Lantsman as well as the NDP Don Davies, and she was going back and forth at both of them, but again, Landsman, all she had was the slogans for the Conservative and said when the time comes, they will give out their plan. But until then, she didn't really offer much.
Here to talk more about the budget, our Deputy Conservative Leader, Melissa Landsman, and NDP finance critic, Don Davies. Hi to both of you. Thank you very much for making the time for this. I appreciate it. Ms. Landsman, I'll start with you. Would a Conservative government reverse the capital gains tax changes that the Liberals have brought in with this budget?
Well, let's get back to how we started. We have the Prime Minister who said 8 years ago, 9 budgets ago, that the rich would pay their fair share. And we know what has happened is that that's not the case. It isn't Justin Trudeau and people like him who have a trust fund who can shelter away those taxes. It isn't the billionaires that he vacations with on islands that move their money to other jurisdictions that have paid this. It's everyday Canadians, welders, plumbers, single mothers, seniors that have paid for all of the spending and all of the taxes that Justin Trudeau has imposed on Canadians.
So I don't understand if that's not really an answer to the question about whether a Conservative government would change that policy in particular, which does apply actually to corporate trusts.
Actually, we're going to continue to focus on axing the tax and building the homes and fixing the budget and stopping the crime. That's what we're talking about with Canadians. And I'm sure that when we have a platform, you will be the first to know, and we might even announce it on your show.
Well, I look forward to that very much. But I think, like, in this instance, I'm just asking for your policy position on something very specific that, and I'll be totally transparent, the Liberals are using to try and wedge against you, right? They're trying to say that your party, as a consequence of not coming out in support of this measure, is not prepared to make wealthy people in this country pay their fair share. You can dispel that very easily by saying we would keep it or we would reverse it, but you're not.
We're going to fight a prime minister who hasn't made anybody pay, or hasn't had the rich guy pay for his promises. He's had everyday Canadians pay for every single one of his inflationary budgets that he's brought forward. And when we do have a platform, you will be the first to know.
So it's fair to say you don't have a position on that tax change at this point?
Well, we're going to continue to fight the fight that we have been fighting for everyday Canadians who are paying far too much, paying more for gas, for groceries, for home heating. They can't afford to live, and that's why we are going to vote against this budget.
Mr. Davies, Ms. Landsman has expressed what the Conservatives have said so far. They're not going to support this budget. The Bloc will not support this budget. Will the NDP?
Well, we're still analyzing the budget. It's 416 pages long. There's a lot in there. You know, where I would start, Bashi, is by saying that right now I think the dominant, fact that should be concerning Parliament is that people are really struggling in this country. Millions of people are struggling with high prices for rent, can't buy food. People, the idea of home ownership is illusory for almost anybody under the age of 35. People are really hurting. And so what the NDP did is we used our seats in the House of Commons to try to get concrete measures in this budget that will help people. And I think we did that. So I'll just give you 3 quick examples. Pharmacare is in this budget, $1.5 billion to get it started. That'll help 9 million people of child-bearing age in this country, millions of people suffering by diabetes, who sometimes are thousands of dollars out of pocket every year. Second, the first ever National School Nutrition Program, which not only helps kids stay healthy and learn better, but also helps their families who are struggling with the high price of food. And finally, there's extensive commitments in there for housing, to keep affordable housing that we have, to build more affordable housing that people can afford, to help renters. So these are core.
So does that mean you support the budget?
Well, we're still analyzing, like I said, because there's things in the budget that we don't like. And we're taking the time not only to fully digest it, but also to consult with people because we think that's important.
Now, as you can see, Melissa Landsman stuck to the slogan as her talking points. I get it. Everybody has talking points. Even Don Davies here, he talks about pharmacare and affordability, the dental care he talks about later on. But I find it funny that he starts complaining about the struggle of individuals with grocery prices, with affordability and renting and home ownership, but then tries to twist it and say, but we're strong-arming the Liberal government with our power in regards to the pharmacare, in regards to food for kids at school, a national food plan. And then when Vashi pushes back saying, so are you supporting the budget? He goes, oh, well, we still got a lot to read. And this just continues.
I understand the utility of a lot of what you just laid out, but to Ms. Lanceman's point, we have the Bank of Canada governor warning that excessive spending at the federal and provincial level could work against the monetary policy he's pursuing. In layman's terms, that means he could take longer to cut rates because of the level of spending. The NDP have pushed the Liberals, by implementing these programs at this juncture to spend more money. Why aren't you more worried about how much that will impact the cost of living for everyday Canadians?
Well, we are. First of all, supplying more housing is anti-inflationary.
Not in the short term, with due respect.
It's anti-inflationary. Every major economist we've consulted has said that. When you put more supply of housing in the market, it has a dampening effect on prices. There's excessive demand right now. When you put more supply out, it will reduce prices. Second of all, we have been calling for more revenue measures. So interestingly about the capital gains tax, the inclusion rate under Brian Mulroney, the Conservatives, was 75%. It dropped to 50, and this budget puts it to 67%. So it's not even as high as it was under the Conservatives in the 1980s.
Now, I'm not sure who's giving Don his talking points, but I don't think bragging about your rate being better than in the 1980s is the way to go, seeing as that was 40 years ago. But as the interview goes on, Vashi goes back to Melissa, pushes her on her talking points, and then moves back to Don and again pushes him on his. And at the end of Don's answer, he kind of puts himself in this corner that, you're going to see here.
Ms. Lanceman, when you talk about the level of spending, we're looking at $53 billion over 6 years, 39 if you take into account anticipated, not yet realized, but anticipated savings. What would the Conservatives not spend that money on? Would it not be creating housing supply, not launching a national food program for kids or lunch program for kids, or not spending on defense?
Look, I think you're asking hypothetical questions. There is no food program. There is no pharmacare program. There is no dental care program. There's 8 dentists in all of Nova Scotia who have signed up for this program. None of these programs actually exist to help people. And, it's for the NDP to get up in the House every single day and scream at the Prime Minister about why the cost of living is so high, why he's created this problem, and then enthusiastically support every single measure that continues to make the lives of every Canadian harder. I don't get it. I don't think their voters get it. I don't think Canadians get it. But I do think they're protecting their leader's pension, and I do think that they are protecting the Prime Minister from having the carbon tax election that we want.
I understand the point you're making, and we can ask Mr. Davies about that. I can ask Mr. Davies about that in a second. But my question is not hypothetical, because what they have baked into their spending plan is rolling out these programs, and some of them, like the Canada Child Benefit, like daycare, for example, are already in existence through agreements with the provinces. I think Canadians are really unclear at this point about, if you think spending is too high, what wouldn't you spend on? Other than the infrastructure bank, other than the ArriveCan app, none of that gets you to a place where you eliminate the deficit, which you've pledged to do.
Well, we'll cut the $21 billion in consultants. We'll cut all of the waste.
So you're never going to hire a single consultant as a Conservative government? Because you did a lot of that under the Harper government.
$21 billion in outside consultants when our public service has grown and our services are actually worse off is something that I think Canadians expect a responsible government to look at. We have debt servicing costs, meaning the interest that we pay on the debt, that are now higher than what we spend on health care in every single province. We think that's unacceptable, and I think most Canadians do too.
I'm not debating whether or not that's acceptable or not. I think you're right. A lot of Canadians feel unsettled by the idea, especially of debt servicing costs exceeding health care transfers because of the state of health care across this country. But they are interested in knowing how you get to a point where that isn't the case. And your party has so far refused to identify, for example, even of the new money announced in this budget, what you wouldn't spend.
No, look, we're going to cut taxes for Canadians. We're going to make sure that our productivity is higher, that we're developing our resources to grow our economy. And you will see that plan in a platform in the next election. And if we can have that carbon tax election ahead of the time where Mr. Davies and his party are protecting the Prime Minister, we'll go for it.
So until then, nobody will know anything about what you plan to do?
I think we've been very clear with Canadians.
I know you get rid of the carbon tax.
We're going to get rid of the carbon tax. We're also going to build homes. We're going to fix the budget, and we're going to stop the crime.
Okay, building homes costs money. But anyway, Mr. Davies, I want to pick up on a point that Ms. Lanceman made, and that is around your party criticizing where you feel the government has fallen short. I believe at one point I've even heard Mr. Singh say that Mr. Trudeau has been a failure as Prime Minister, and yet the reason he remains Prime Minister is because of your party's support. How can you reconcile that for people watching right now?
Because we do something that is rare in politics. We keep our word. We signed a confidence and supply agreement that said that in exchange for us supporting the government, we extracted 27 different demands from this government. This was not a shared agenda. This is not things that we agree on with Liberals. These were things that we forced them to do. Now, the big ticket items like dental care and pharmacare, by definition, took some time to develop. And Ms. Lanceman, with great respect, is totally wrong. They are real. There's 1.7.
But those dentists are not signing up. With great respect, I asked Minister Holland multiple times. There's hardly any who
There's
have
no requirement to sign up now. That requirement has lifted. You watch, dentists will sign up by the droves in May.
You're confident in this government to execute on that program
100%.
based on their record?
100%. 1.7 million Canadians have already signed up. You're going to see people go to the dentist in May. We're enrolling 500,000 Canadians per month, and we'll do so every month through the rest of this year. We started last December. In pharmacare, Ms. Lanceman knows there's legislation in the House right now. It'll be passed by June, and I'm already told that there are provinces chomping at the bit to sign an agreement with the federal government. Why wouldn't you? The federal government is going to give 100% of the money to any premier who agrees to provide diabetes class medication devices and contraceptives for free through their public health care system. As long as the province agree to do that. Of course they're going to do that. These programs are real.
Again, I recognize the utility in the programs, but with respect, Mr. Davies, you at the same time look Canadians in the eye as a party and say the country is so much worse off. You can't buy a home. You can't afford the cost of living right now because of the leadership of the Liberal government. Is it worth it to keep them in power to get pharmacare, a little bit of pharmacare and dental care?
Yeah, I think it's important for us to complete the agreement that we made. We said we'd support this agreement till June 2025, this government, pardon me. And we still have, dental care still has to be fully entrenched. Pharmacare, the legislation is not passed. So we want to
support the budget.
We want to carry through with those. You know, it's something that we're still evaluating.
But you have to, because you just said you'll keep your word on the agreement, which goes until June.
And that, my friends, is what I call a checkmate. Essentially, she got him to admit that, yeah, they're going to support it because they have this agreement, as I showed you earlier, till June of next year. So as much as they want to tiptoe and dance around this idea that they're still looking at it and they need to get their demands met, the fact is they're going to support it. But hey, this is just my view on the situation. I'd love to hear from you guys, so leave your comments in the comment section below. If you've made it to the end of the video, I do appreciate it. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.